Hi, and welcome back to Salon Talks. I'm your host for today, Brian Karam, and with me, it is a joy to have with us Michael Cohen, the very first person to ever split away from Donald Trump and give him unmitigated grief for the last 5 years, which has been a joy to see. So, Michael, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Brian. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Let's just start with last week. How did you feel about that? Saying it was the first time you were in a room with him for about 5 years. What was it like?
Like I had said to some of the other members of the press, it was absolutely nothing. I felt absolutely nothing. Very similar to when you're walking down the street and you pass somebody who you do not know. It's not that you wish anything bad on that individual. It's just you feel nothing for them. You don't know them. You don't care. That's exactly how I felt. I wasn't there to make friends with Donald. I wasn't there to protect Donald. I wasn't there to harm Donald. I was there to tell the truth. And that's all that I did.
And let's talk a little bit about that. How did he look to you? I mean, I've seen him since he left the White House. He doesn't seem as in good a shape as he was when I last saw him.
Well, that's a big presumption that he was ever in good shape. The answer is he has not been, but he didn't look good at all. In fact, he looked beaten up and weathered. He looked really disheveled and really just different. You know, he looked like somebody had just sucked the life out of him. Rest assured, this New York Attorney General case is really affecting him, specifically because it's about his money. His money is his id, his ego, his super ego, all combined into one narcissistic sociopath who for the last, 70 plus years, right? And I say 70 plus, obviously we all know that he's 77, but he wasn't this way, obviously, when he was 7, or maybe he was. So let's just say his whole life has been predicated on his wealth and his standing. And what this Attorney General case threatens to do is to basically expose the emperor without his clothes. And according to Stormy Daniels, that's not a pretty picture.
She calls him Mushroom Man for a reason, I guess. But but the question I have about that is, and I want to get into the other things you've got against him, including the FOIA, which is really the meat of it. But two questions come from that. Do you think he's going to lose a lot of his financial? Well, I mean, it's already determined. There's a summary judgment. I mean, this is just about how much money they're going to take, right?
Correct. This case is no longer about liability. He lost that in the motion where Judge Engoron ruled from the bench, because it's a bench trial.
Right.
He ruled from the bench that the Trump Organization committed fraud. And as a direct result, the license to operate in the state of New York will be revoked. And that's why they've now assigned a receiver in order to prevent the transfer, hypothecation, sale, or encumbrance on any of those assets. And the reason that they did that is because what the second part of the trial is all about. It's all about disgorgement. How much money is the state going to fine him for as a direct result of the actions that he had taken with the usage of the statement of financial condition? So we know that it is a baseline. The bottom number is 250 million. Mind you, that doesn't even begin to touch any of the additional disgorgement that they're going to be looking for, nor does it take into consideration the fines and the penalties that are associated with this type of a case. So I suspect it's going to be substantially more than the 250. In fact, I've been so bold as to make a prediction that it'll be between 600 and 700 million dollars. Mind you, he does not have that in equity. So when these assets get sold, remember, he is low basis in most of these, if not all of these assets. Take the tax implication and then subtract from that the outstanding mortgages that may exist. Technically, there's nothing left.
That's going to be, and you and I both know, I from covering him and you from working with him, that will hit him harder than anything else, being considered broke.
Well, let's put it this way. Right now, that's what he's confronted with. And yes, as I previously stated, it's his id, his ego, and his super ego.
And so
will that hit him harder than the loss of his freedom when he ultimately sits for the January 6th criminal, or he sits for the Mar-a-Lago documents case, or he sits for the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case? Loss of freedom, and I'm talking firsthand knowledge now. It really sucks, man. I can tell you. And while that's not right now on his plate, so he doesn't think about it, when that is in front of him, and that's the issue, I promise you, it's going to hit him as hard as this case is currently hitting.
Yep. And that leads me to the last question before we get into the FOIA stuff. Do you think he'll be on the ballot in 2022? And if so, do you think he'll win?
Well, I don't think he's going to win, but do I think he's going to be on the ballot, short of some intervening circumstance like and I'm not even referring to if he's criminally convicted. I think he'll run from a prison cell if that's what he believes will ultimately get him off of the liabilities that he's currently facing. The presidential race is, in his mind, and it should be in all of our minds, it is the get out of jail free card for him. And it's his only option. We know that he's guilty, right, on, if not all, the vast majority of the 91 counts that are currently charged against him. So the only way that he ends up defeating that is if, in fact, he becomes president. So he's not looking to become president in order to benefit America or Americans. He's clearly once again doing it to benefit himself. Brian, something interesting happened at the trial when I was on the stand. Alina Habba, his lawyer, started asking me questions about some of my testimony when I testified. People aren't aware that I testified 7 times before congressional committees. She asked me, well, did you state, and then she read out the question, were you specifically asked by Donald Trump to inflate the statement of financial condition? And I said no. And she goes, no? What do you mean no? So she goes, you testified before that he told you to inflate the numbers. What they don't do when they allow you to answer yes or no only type questions, which is unfair, but thank goodness the New York AG's prosecutors on redirect asked me. What I tried to explain is when they use the word specifically, and how many times, Brian, have you and I had this conversation offline? Donald Trump speaks like a mob boss. He doesn't turn around and say to you, Michael, Alan, meaning Alan Weisselberg, I want you guys to inflate my net worth, let's say from $5.5 billion to $8 billion, $7 billion, whatever the number might be. Go into the back and go figure it out and come back and show me how you're going to do it. That's not how he speaks. What he said specifically was, and that, of course, was why I had said no, because he did not specifically state it. But what he says is, I'm not worth $5.5 billion. In fact, I'm worth more than 6, probably 7. It could even be 8. Go into the back, go take a look, figure it out, and come back and see me. That's how he speaks. So you don't have to be a code breaker, especially when you are working for him, as long as I did, in order to understand what he wants you to do. And how you know that that's what he wanted you to do, which I explained, is because we brought the document back to him with the numbers that were altered in red pen so that he could see the new bottom line number, approve it, give it back to Alan so that it could be bound, by Weiser Mazer, which was the accounting firm who handled the statement of financial condition on behalf. It was one of their, job functions. So that's why. Now, the greatest thing is as soon as Trump comes out of the room, he's declaring victory We just won the case. He goes, but of course has to now go and attack Judge Engoron and this law secretary. The interesting thing here is while his sycophantic, moronic MAGA followers are all sitting there and saying, well, Cohen lied, he lied, Cohen's a liar, right? It's not true. The only person who actually lied during my 2 days on the stand was Donald himself when Judge Engoron wasn't having any of it. He turned around, he put Donald on the stand under oath and asked him, who were you talking about when you went outside these court doors and you spoke to the press? And he said, Michael Cohen. And the judge said, I don't acknowledge what you're saying, and I don't believe that you're a credible witness. In fact, he fined him another $10,000 and really warned him for the last time that this nonsense has to stop. So who's the liar here? You know, there's more than one side to the story, but these maggots are really something special. They refuse to open their ears. They refuse to open their eyes and see what's really, it's almost like, don't listen to what, to what others are saying and don't see what you see. Just listen and look at what I'm telling you to listen and look at.
Yeah.
And that's how they treat their Fuhrer. It's terrible.
Yeah. And one of the things that came out of all of this, when you were sent to jail and we were and in full disclosure, you and I were writing the book and your second book, and I sent off and you and I talked about the information you wanted to get from the Department of Justice. And part of that information, we filed a FOIA. And in that FOIA, this was about your unconstitutional remand. And for 2 years now, you've been trying to get information that would prove some of the allegations that you've made against Donald Trump. We both know the information is there. I'd like you to unfold that a little bit and talk to us about the problems you talk about when you talk. The MAGA members have said there is a weaponization of the DOJ under Biden to go after Trump. Your allegation, and I will maintain the truth after having, and the facts show that if there was any weaponization of the DOJ, it occurred when Bill Barr ran the DOJ, and it occurred to assist Donald Trump. So what I'd like you to talk about, we have given Bill Barr, he's almost redeemed himself. He's going on talk shows. He's talking about what a great guy he is and what a horrible person Donald Trump is. But Bill Barr made Donald Trump possible as well. So I'd like you to unfold some of that, unpack it if you would.
So we have to start with the first part. Donald Trump, 100%. And it's the name of the book, Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the United States Department of Justice Against His Critics. That was the theme of the book that, that I was interested in putting out there. And one of the big problems for me, let me just go on and first say that what Donald does, and he's excellent at it, he's the great deflector. Whatever he knows that he has done to others, he tries to impugn upon the next person. In this case, it would be Joe Biden. That's just who he is, and that's how he rolls. As I started writing Revenge, the reason that I ended up calling you, Brian, for assistance in it is because I could get nowhere in terms of interviews with people. I was unable to get the information that I needed, that I believe is desperately needed to finish this book. And I say that because what Revenge does is it lays out for the reader the most disgraceful prosecution of an American citizen in at least the last 100 years. It is the most corrupt prosecution against a U.S. citizen orchestrated by the President of the United States and his willing and complicit bloviated Attorney General, in this case, Bill Barr, and the weaponization of the Justice Department, all in order to silence a critic. This is out of control, and that's what the book does. So one of the things that we learned in your interviews on my behalf with so many people, from FBI agents, former and present, as well as to judges. I mean, you really did a fabulous job in reaching out to the people that we outlined that were needed in order to put out this book.
Thank you.
But I mean, really, one of the things that we learned is that all of the documents that are in the possession of government are being sealed. This is amazing. Almost like the way that they sealed the Kennedy assassination. It's truly spectacular to see. So when we first filed that FOIA through, this is even pre-Mark Zaid, they came back with an acknowledgement that there are 0 documents, and this is written in the book, there are 0 documents that are affiliated to your request,
And
or
the
that are
request was
responsive, that are responsive to your request under FOIA.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm scratching my
the request was about your unconstitutional remand. And
correct.
I'll predicate it by saying, when you file a FOIA, one of the things they always tell you is that, the third party, you could violate third party privacy rights. You signed a waiver saying,
I waived that.
yeah,
Sure.
you said, look, I want the documents that are about me. These are my documents. And
Well, they're really America's documents.
Yeah, they are.
The same way the same way that the documents that Trump stole and put in Mar-a-Lago do not belong to him. They
Good
belong
point.
to the American people. The point of this book is to open up the country's eyes into how dangerous a human being Donald Trump is towards democracy. But going back to this section, when we put in that FOIA request, they responded back that there are no responses that are in our possession that
no information, no pages at all.
Nothing, 0. Well, I knew that was a lie because somehow or another, and to this day, I don't know how I got them. Maybe I got them during some of the testimony, may have taken the document or whatever. No, it wasn't discovery. Somehow I just had them. I had 4 or 5 documents that would say that their reply to our request is inaccurate, at which point in time you were kind enough to reach out to Mark Zaid, who's a renowned attorney in this area and a friend of yours, and I provided you with those 4 or 5 documents. You then returned them to him. He filed the action, and all of a sudden, after 3-4 months, all of a sudden they replied back, oops, we made a mistake. We apologize. In fact, there are documents that are responsive to your FOIA request. And it's not 0. It wasn't 100. It was 486,000 documents. 486,000. We're not talking about 7 or 8 where it's a obvious, it's a mistake simply because there was just so few. 486,000 documents. Now, because it dealt with me and I sent in my waiver, and because it deals with a constitutional issue, I was supposed to receive priority consideration and processing. Well, they were supposed to process a minimum of 500 documents per month. Now, that would, of course, take, if you do the math, and I'm not going to be exact, but it's greater than 90 years in order to get all the documents. Now, all they need to do is stick it on a thumb drive, send it to us, and allow me to do it on my own. But no, that's never going to happen. Not with governments, especially not a government that's trying to hide.
And who was running the DOJ at this time?
Well, the DOJ at that time was still Trump, and it was still under Bill Barr. However, it has now rolled off into the Biden administration. And it is as frustrating to me as frustrating can be, because after now 18 or 20, I think we're coming close to 20 months now, despite the fact that they keep claiming that they have processed 500 documents. Oh, they said, can you do us a favor? Get a load of this shit. Can you do us a favor? And can you alter your request, taking out the 302s, which are grand jury documents that even Mark said you probably won't be able to get because it's grand jury documentation. I said, okay, fine. It took us down to like 90,000 documents. So you would think, okay, that's certainly a lot less, even though I would love the grand jury documents as well.
And let's be honest, this is a closed case. This is done. And this is a Freedom of Information request about information on a case that you are involved in and you should have access to. And it was Bill Barr who said, who weaponized the DOJ against you and said no, and in fact denied at the beginning that there was any documents. And the reason why this is important for all Americans is if this can happen to you, Michael, in such a high-profile case, imagine what will happen to others who don't have the profile or the access to the media that you have. Correct?
It's an absolute nightmare. And I'm going to give you a scenario after I just finished this thought on it, just how bad it can be. But 20 months have now gone by and not a single document turned over. In fact, they've even turned around and then they expanded their right not to give it by claiming that there's like 15 governmental agencies, from the FBI to the CIA to the National Security Agency, that need to review, Bureau of Prison, Department of Correction, you name it, that need to see the documents before they release them, because maybe they want to redact it. And then they even went so bold as to say that some of the documents could injure the life or the knowledge of who the federal agent is or might be. I mean, the whole thing to me is so absurd. It's beyond. In fact, so many members of Congress now have asked for investigations to be opened, and FOIA doesn't care. They don't care who's making the request. It started out with Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Congressman Ted Lieu. They made a request saying this is ridiculous. We want documentation to show it. Then it was by Senator Dick Durbin regarding the IRS's attack on me, despite the fact I have never not paid taxes. I've never asked for an extension. I've never had overseas bank accounts. All my money was in Capital One Bank that was located at the base of the building that I live in. How could this be? Maybe it's a tax omission, not a tax evasion. So what they want to know what happened there. It then got even more members of Congress jumped in on it. Congressman Steve Cohen, Congressman Jamie Raskin brought it up at a hearing, Congressman Dan Goldman. I mean, so many members of Congress have asked, and so far, nothing, not a single piece of paper, not one. I mean, this is really something. And shame on the Biden administration for not pushing this thing through. I am a political prisoner, the first political prisoner held by my own country. All right, as an American, I am the first political prisoner held by my own country because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right and not publish a book, or not agree not to publish a book, not to do media, not to speak to anybody, because that's what the former president of the United States wanted. So instead, what do? They jail their critics. And this is the last part I wanted to bring up, how dangerous Donald Trump is, or legitimately could be. Don't take my word for it. I want you to Google it, to all of your listeners, Brian, and I want you to understand, this is not my words. These are the words of the deranged former president who said if he wins the presidency, the first thing he's going to do is he's going to rewrite the Constitution. I mean, the fact that anybody could even make such a statement, especially somebody who barely writes or reads, he's going to rewrite the Constitution. No, this is really
I know.
This is not a joke. I agree. This is the danger of Donald Trump. By rewriting the Constitution, he intends to strip the legislative branch and the judiciary of their powers under the tripartite system of United States government and confer all power to the executive branch. Because in his mind, that's the only way that things can get done. There's too much fighting. There's too much going back and forth. The legislative branch then chimes in, meaning Congress and the Senate, right? Then they, and the House and the Senate, then he says, then it gets appealed. Then it has to go to the Supreme Court and the federal government. And he goes, I'm going to confer all power to the executive branch. And by doing so, what is he really saying? He's conferring all the power of government, the entire gambit, to himself, the chief executive. and that he will do whatever he wants. So rest assured, Brian, people like yourself, certainly myself, journalists, members of the court, members of Congress, members of the Supreme Court of the United States, he can have a special group, no different than the way it took place under Nazi Germany. He could have a special group show up. Stalin used to do this, show up to your home, kick your door down, bag you, tag you, and end up putting you in some sort of a facility where nobody knows, a gulag, so to speak. And that's it, simply because that's what he wants to do. That's the power that he wants. And the only other person or people that I could think of that have that sort of power are kings, supreme leaders like a Mohammed bin Salman, Kim Jong-un, right? Dictators like Vladimir Putin. That's the power that Donald Trump seeks for himself.
Yeah, despots, kings, and of course, dictators. Those are the three that he wants to be. I get it, and I agree with you. And when you go back to when people wonder why was the FOIA so important, it was because you wanted to write a book. They didn't want you to write a book, and then they threw you unconstitutionally, had you remanded back to prison after you were released. And the documents that you sought would find how that went about and why it was done. And those documents were never provided as of this day. We still don't know, although we do know how and why it happened. The paperwork that would prove it has never been provided to anyone who's asked for it. And even though it had to do with you, they still won't provide it to you. That's the danger. The danger.
Well, Brian, you were actually fantastic. There was a federal agent that you ended up speaking to, and I, of course, use that in the book. You want to tell your listeners exactly what that FBI agent told you?
Well, what actually they told me was that, we know who did it. We know who's behind it. And that was never a question from anybody in the FBI. But what point is that where you were talking about specifically? Yeah, that it was never any question that Donald Trump and Bill Barr was behind all of this. There's never been any question of anyone who ever worked in the FBI or the DOJ who was behind your unconstitutional remand. It was never for discussion, and the paperwork to prove it is still sitting somewhere in a government vault or on a computer somewhere. And it's vital to the American people, I think, to show exactly what happened to you, because as you said, this could happen to anyone, particularly if Donald Trump is back in office. So I want to end today with a couple of things about Donnie. What do you predict will happen in the next few months? And I know you're not done in court, but where do you see this going with Trump? Do you see him being, I've always said I don't think they'll put him in a federal prison, although I'd love to see him put in the same cell they had you in. That would be fun. But I said that basically because he has Secret Service protection and the federal government already owns it, they should just take Alcatraz and call it Mar-a-Lago West and make him the only resident there and give him a little, two-hole golf course and let his Secret Service live with him on that island to the end of his days. Charge $20 for visitors and let him walk in and see him standing behind his
You know what we call that? When you go to visit somebody, you go to see somebody who's in prison, you're really only going to go one time because it's really not about seeing them. You don't really care about them. It's just about being able to see the person in, prison garb. And so it's called monkey in a cage.
Yeah, that's the orange monkey.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot of prison lingo.
We'll see the orange monkey in his cage throwing poo at us. That was
could you imagine him holding on to the cage and screaming and yelling, "You feed me!"
Yeah, see, I think that'd be the perfect solution.
But instead of M&Ms or peanuts, right, you're going to be throwing him Oreo cookies and Lay's potato chips, his two favorite things in the world,
and cheeseburgers.
Yeah, right. I'll dance for a McDonald's.
Where do you see this going in the next few months?
So this case with the New York Attorney General is slated to end December 22nd. That then gives a couple of months, like 2.5 months, before which there's the March case, and I think that has to do with the attempt to overturn the free and fair election, the Jack Smith case on that one. Then we also have in March as well, and this is going to be complicated because you can't have two of these going on at the same time. So one is going to have to give. You have the District Attorney of New York case that's slated to start. I think it's like March 22nd of 2024.
They
all
said
the
they put that
while,
one off. Yeah.
I don't know which one's going to get put off. It's, the Jack Smith case may not be ready for trial at that time. These things take a lot of
Meanwhile,
time.
you got Colorado too. Remember, they're trying to ban him from the ballot. That's already ongoing in Colorado.
I'll tell you personally, I don't like that. I listened to Chris Christie, and I happen to agree with him on this specific point. That's going to only, bolster his followers, right? Yeah. These MAGA morons into saying, well, this whole thing is about keeping Trump off the ballot. And I say, bull, nah, let's just kill him at the ballot box. That's what you want to do. You want to create a massive blue tidal wave, something I talk about regularly on, my two podcasts. We need to all ensure that we are registered to vote in the 2024 election. It is the single most important thing that you could do. But don't just make sure that you're registered. Make sure that anyone that lives with you is registered of age. Make sure that your family, your friends, your coworkers, the person that walks your dog for all I care, make sure that they are all registered. It's easy to do, right? And vote. We need a blue tidal wave to drown out this red MAGA nonsense, because the only way that we end up destroying Trumpism and this MAGA ideology is to vote them all out of office and let the maggots that, these folks with the 3 teeth and 4 brain cells, let them scurry back to wherever the rock that they came out from. Because again, democracy, America, our future, it's worth it.
2 final questions for you. One is, how do you see the Georgia case going now? You're a former attorney, and Rico, they have cornered many people, including Mark Meadows, and there are people who are already taken plea deals in Georgia. How do you see that? I mean, that doesn't look good for Donnie.
It clearly doesn't. You're talking about people that were in that inner circle with him. And now they will be testifying against him. Personally, I have a whole issue with prosecutors, specifically the Southern District of New York, where guys like Nick Roos or guys like Tom McKay, Andrea Griswold, Robert Kazami, even Jeffrey Berman, who allegedly recused himself, but in his own book, of course, acknowledges that he did not really recuse himself. I have a real problem with it. And it's something that Judge Jed Rakoff, federal judge here in New York, wrote a book about. It's called Why the Innocent Plead Guilty and the Guilty Go Free.
Beautiful book.
Prosecutors, it's an amazing book, and it explains the unfair balance that exists. They're getting sweetheart deals, whereas, as you know from the book, Brian, I was given 48 hours from a Friday at 5:30 p.m. to a Monday to plead guilty, or they were filing an 80-page indictment against my wife. There was never against me and my wife, and that was not going to happen. They were going to include my wife in this. I mean, you want to talk about creating a hostage video? So when I turned around during that trial and I stated that I lied to Judge Pauly, I lied about not being guilty of tax evasion and misrepresentation to a bank, because I didn't. However, I knew that the decision by the judge in terms of the time was going to be the same, and there was not a chance in the world I was going to let my wife get involved in any of this nonsense. So let me just bring that back to what's going on in Georgia. I am happy, and this is the way prosecutors work, but I do have a real problem with the fact that they're giving so many people immunity, and they're giving them these incredible breaks for attempting to overturn a free and fair election.
Yes.
I mean, that is the basic core of our American democracy. The peaceful transfer of power, the turning around and congratulating the victor in a presidential race. And here's the more important thing, not only congratulating them, wishing them well, because wishing the next president well means that you're wishing America well, but not Donald. He is such a petulant, animal, a child, that he can't wish the next guy well. In fact, he would rather see the country burn down because he's not the leader, because he lost. And instead of acknowledging the reasons that he lost, he accomplished nothing. All he did is sow divisiveness, hatred, racism, sexism, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. That's all that he did. And every promise that he made to the American people never came to fruition, whether it's building the wall to repealing Obamacare. Whatever their reason was for voting for him, he failed them, including 1 million Americans died as a result of COVID on his watch.
Yeah, that's my final question for you. Has to do with one of the things that MAGA members say about you often is that you would be still with Donnie today if things hadn't gone sour for you. What has often, what I'll be honest with you, what endears me to you is your response to those people. It's one of the things I find probably one of the most honest things I've ever heard anybody say. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to explain to people again why you are where you are and the path that you chose from Don. Because I think I didn't
choose, the funny thing is I didn't choose the path. The path was chosen for me.
You chose since it was chosen for you, you've chosen since then.
Right.
It's your choices after that I find compelling and that people should hear.
Well, I stated, and I did it publicly on ABC with George Stephanopoulos when I said, I will not allow history to remember me as the villain of Donald Trump's story. And, my first loyalty belongs to my wife, my daughter, my son, and my country. And it always will. I didn't wake up one day and say, whoa, what happened? How, I'm in a cult. I'm in a cult. Now I'm out. I didn't get that choice on whether to extricate myself from the cult. I was used as a pawn by Donald and whoever the idiot was that was around him that told him it would be a good idea. I certainly hope that they're not, eating for free at Mar-a-Lago like everybody else was, right? That's certainly for sure. But that's really the answer. Where would I be today? I don't have a real honest answer that I can give other than to say when the light was turned on and I can see clearly for myself, I knew what I had to do. And it's really to ensure that Donald Trump, for the first time in his life, is held accountable for his own dirty deeds.
And I've never heard it stated better. Look, I thank you, Michael, for doing this. You've got some things you'd like to plug.
Yeah, so if you're a Mea Culpa podcast fan, just to let you know, moved the RSS feed, the new RSS feed, which has me holding my hand up, nothing but the truth, is in blue. We changed the background to blue so you'll know which is the new feed that contains not only the old past episodes, but all new episodes going forward will be on this RSS feed that's going to be through the Midas Touch Network. So I am joining, the Midas Brothers, Legal AF, and a slew of other top-rated podcasts. Just to tell you a quick one, when I first started Mea Culpa, I didn't start it because, hey, I want to be a podcaster. I did it because I had nothing else to do. I was on home confinement. And as a result, what a platform with over 125 million downloads so far to date. We have been a top podcast, a top Apple, top everything podcast, news podcast in America, literally since the day that we started. And so I thank anybody who is a fan of it. And if you aren't, or you want to just listen to it, it is raw and it is unfiltered. It's me at my worst or my best, depending upon whether you like me.
Well, I certainly enjoy it.
Yeah, it's if you have
I've been
a chance.
A guest, full confession, I've been a guest and it's always been fun.
It is. And I can also tell you that just go to wherever you listen to your podcast. You'll see again me with the blue background. That's the new RSS feed. Plus, I also started with Ben Meiselas of the Midas Touch Network. We are now on that. It's called Political Beatdown. It's live. It's on YouTube. And when we're on, which is Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m., we continuously rank either number 1 or number 2 in the world on YouTube. So that's also me, raw and unfiltered. In every single episode, I find who was like the worst person in politics for the day. And they, of course, get something that we're very much known for here in New York, the old 2-finger salute. Yeah. So a lot of people, they want to create like a 2-finger salute emoji. So I hope everybody has a chance to join us on Political Beatdown. That's YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts, the new Mea Culpa, again, with the blue background.
So once again, for Salon Talks, I am Brian Karam. This is Michael Cohen. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.